Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. I can also read from the phone, but so Hare Krishna and welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class this morning. We continue to read from the 5th canto. What's happening here? Chapter 17, verse 13. Yeah. So this is a very long verse. I'm going to skip the Sanskrit, I guess. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram jaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tajochayam mudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshu abhatrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti bhavadinaishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, I will go right to the translation because also a very difficult prose. I cannot chant this, and it's a very long verse. In each of those tracts of land, there are many gardens filled with flowers and fruits according to the season, and there are beautifully decorated hermitages as well. Between the great mountains demarcating the borders of those lands lie enormous lakes of clear water filled with newly grown lotus flowers. Aquatic birds such as swans, ducks, water chickens, and cranes become greatly excited by the fragrance of lotus flowers, and the charming sound of bumblebees fills the air. The inhabitants of those lands are important leaders among the demigods. Always attended by their respective servants, they enjoy life in gardens alongside the lakes. In this pleasing situation, the wives of the demigods smile playfully at their husbands and look upon them with lusty desires. All the demigods and their wives are constantly supplied with sandalwood pulp and flower garlands by their servants. In this way, all the residents of the 8 heavenly varshas enjoy, attracted by the activities of the opposite sex. Purport. Here is a description of the lower heavenly planets. The inhabitants of those planets enjoy life in the pleasing atmosphere of clear lakes, filled with newly grown lotus flowers, and gardens filled with fruits, flowers, various kinds of birds, and humming bees. In that atmosphere, they enjoy life with their very beautiful wives, who are always sexually stimulated. Nonetheless, they are all devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as will be explained in subsequent verses. The inhabitants of this earth also desire such heavenly enjoyment, but when they somehow or other achieve imitation pleasures like sex and intoxication, they completely forget the service of the Supreme Lord. In the heavenly planets, however, although the residents enjoy superior sense gratification, they never forget their positions as eternal servant of the Supreme Being. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swabharantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagishayasya vadhane, Lakshmiryasya chavakshasi, Yasya dhiriraye samvit, Tam narasimham maham bhaje, Pralada hridayaladam, Bhakta vichavidaram, Sharatindurchim vande parintra vandanam harim. So the chapter is entitled The Descendants of the River Ganges. And as Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport, the description we just read is one of the so-called lower heavenly planets. In Vedic astrology, there is a concept that there are 14 planetary systems, 7 higher, 7 lower planetary systems, and they're distinguished as heavenly planets and hellish planets and in between. Bhumandala, or the earth, is considered in between, so we are in the middle situated, and we have both heavenly and hellish aspects of life. There's a lot of enjoyment, but there's also a lot of possible suffering. So here, this is like a very fantastic imagery, or like images that tempt to want that. You know, there are many descriptions in the Vedas in general that glorify and highlight how it looks like on the heavenly planets. And then people, also in India, it's still a lot present these days, worship so-called demigods in order to attain those abodes. Perhaps for many Western people who are anyway rather skeptical about like religion and like beliefs in this of this kind, they think, yeah, well, if they need to, they can do. From a Vedic perspective, there's a lot of emphasis to not consider that something which is worth achieving. Although there's like a lot of enjoyment, as it said here, and a much higher standard of enjoyment as we know it on planet Earth, and even it said like those demigods there, they don't forget their role or identity as servants of the Supreme Lord besides the enjoyment. It is still temporary, and it tempts the soul to stay in this world, although we do not belong here. You know, we are in this world, but not from this world, the saying goes. And there are different levels of heavenly planets. Now we are the lower heavenly planets. There are even higher planets which provide an even more blissful existence. It is described on top of the Mount Meru. It's Brahmaloka, or like the residence of Lord Brahma. Mount Meru is like, this is an interesting image as well, like a huge mountain of gold. My speculation is would make sense to equate that with the lotus stem coming from the navel of Garbhodakashiya Vishnu, but it doesn't really hold up if you see pastimes like the Milk Ocean pastime where the Mount Meru is carried from one place to another. But then it said below him, they are the residents of the chief demigods, like also Indra and so on, who govern different areas of the universe, govern different elements, so many things these demigods govern. I think the number of total demigods, which chief and sub-demigods and so on, is like 30 million in the universe. So there are quite a few of them. And they're all, of course, they understand themselves as administrative servants of Vishnu, Supreme Lord. And Brahma is the chief. He's a pure devotee of the Lord. And said Brahma is in a direct connection with Garbhodakashiya Vishnu. The Vishnu laying within each universe on the Garbhodaka ocean, which he manifests out of himself, out of his skin pores. And Brahma and Vishnu are connected through the lotus stem. So Brahma resides on the top of the lotus. And the lotus stem is also described as having a golden glow because the jivas residing within there are also spiritual light, powerful. That's one reason why it's golden. Perhaps there are other reasons that I'm not aware of, which are mentioned somewhere else in Shastra. And it said also Brahma is similarly like Vishnu, although Vishnu is in a laying position, appearing to be sleeping. He's actually enjoying a transcendental slumber called Yoga Nidra. Right? He's present, but he's not gone like sleeping. And Brahma himself has also said when he goes to sleep, there's always like Brahma has a life of also 100 years, which is calculated like in huge numbers. And when he sleeps, it said it's also Yoga Nidra. He's not like in a tamasic sleep of forgetfulness. It's rather said they communicate while Brahma sleeps. He communicates with Garbhodakashiya Vishnu regarding matters of the creation. So it's rather they like take a rest, but they are not inactive or in forgetfulness. So Brahma is a very powerful being, a chief demigod, and then there are other demigods who are not so exalted, not so elevated. And Brahma is the one who manifests, based on the blessings of Vishnu, this what we call this material universe. Vishnu, so to speak, gives not just the blueprint, but also all the ingredients. And Brahma is constructing around the lotus stem all the planetary systems, 14, all of them. And he takes them out of the body of Garbhodakashiya Vishnu. It said in a subtle form they are existing within the body of Garbhodakashiya Vishnu, and Brahma kind of takes them from there. And said also we as the jivas, as the souls, we reside in the belly of Garbhodakashiya Vishnu when Brahma is sleeping. Because when Brahma is sleeping, parts of the universe are being destroyed based on the rising of the water level, like a huge flood. It's kind of going up to the lower planetary systems. Heavenly systems are definitely also destroyed then, but like 3 planetary systems, including Brahmaloka, remain intact. So at that time also, the jivas, they stay within the womb, not in the belly of Garbhodakasha Vishnu. So, and there are like so many, states of existence within this material world, and the soul, of course, is tempted to enjoy all the varieties possible. There's also the possibility to feel attracted to the so-called lower planetary systems, which we call hellish planetary systems, but which does not mean that they're only pure suffering. That means there are also those beings who are, averse to God, like being like more like, say, dark beings, which are like have a lot of mystical powers, magic powers, like Naga beings are described, which also enjoy opulences and a lot of enjoyment there, you know. So, but the thing is, like, all these roles are temporary, and we undergo different types of transformations all the time, also in this body, which we can compare to seasons. Now we are already in autumn season again, and if you observe a bit what's happening, it's an interesting process to see the leaves on the trees. You know, first of all, they change color, and though to us it appears a beautiful play of colors, it's impressive, and we enjoy autumn. It's a sign of death. They die. But they do it in a way, apparently beautiful way with the colors, you know. And then the trees get rid of the colors slowly, and of the leaves. And sometimes also some wind is necessary, heavy wind, to take them away from the trees. And then they rot on the ground and gradually being taken up from the tree again. And then they blossom again at some point in the next spring. So that's the problem, that there's no permanent situation in each body of physical existence. So that's what we suffer from, asat. We have this word is called asat, or like it has no existence in time. It constantly changes. And on the contrary, but we have an original, which is sat, eternal. And that's the spiritual sphere. And I said the spiritual realm is the original, and the material world is rather a reflection, or only a reflection of it, which has less, like a shadow, which has less than the original it reflects. So, and also in the Sri Isha Upanishad, we are instructed that we should know both. We hear now in this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam a lot about, or like in this canto, about the structure of the material universe. Also before in the chapter, the Mount Meru was described, the huge golden mountain and so on. And we hear about in this canto about the heavenly planets, but also there will be a lot of description about the hellish planets. And why should we know both, like not just heavenly and hellish planets, but also in contrast, spiritual world and material world? What would you say? Why is it important to know in detail about both? Because Sri Upanishad in the 14th mantra is instructing us. We'll recite the mantra. Sambhutim cha vinasham cha yastad vedo bhayam saha vinashena mrityum tirtva sambhutyam mrittamashnute. One should know perfectly the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and his transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes, as well as a temporary material creation with its temporary demigods, men, and animals. When one knows these, he surpasses death and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation with it. And in the eternal kingdom of God, he enjoys his eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Why should we know both? Ideas? We can understand things by contrasting to another. If you're not aware of the nature, or like of the true nature, for example, of the material world, we might tend to mistake it as something which is not. Because it said the nature of the material world, or Maya, is it presents us with the illusion of existence in a certain way, but actually it's only the appearance of existence. Maya literally means that which is not. That's the meaning of the word Maya. So also, and this is related to the Sat and Asat aspect. In time, having existence and non-existence is, in the Vedic understanding, based on whether it has permanency or unchangeability. It said also the soul is Sat because it never changes, it remains eternal. The body is Asat because in every moment actually it's transforming, changing. We don't see all the changes. We think, now it's the same like yesterday and the day before and the week before. And maybe gradually over the month and years we realize, there are some wrinkles, or there's something, or some weight is lost or something or whatever. But actually in every moment, cells are changing, dying and are being reproduced and so on. So therefore it is said it never has actually a constant state, though it appears to be for some time a permanent thing which we enjoy and identify with, but it is not, it has no existence because it's under the dictate of time. So that's the essential understanding of what has existence and what not. And so we as souls are Sat, and therefore we belong actually also into the spiritual realm, which is also Sat, unchanging, eternal, full of bliss. Whereas the material nature is constantly in change and therefore brings us suffering, because we can never remain in a state of happiness or existence, and therefore we struggle. Srila Prabhupada also makes the point here in the purport, mentioning the 6 major changes of the body: birth and growing up, then maybe producing children, remaining for a while, growing older, gradually dwindling, and then deceasing. So this we go through all the time. And this has to be understood. Srila Prabhupada identified that as the core problems of life. He said birth, death, old age, and disease. He said that's actually the essential problems a living entity has. Because not just once. We think, I live just once, as people think. But we go through this repeatedly. And the calling of the Vedic scriptures is to end the cycle of these repeated births and deaths. Because the original home is waiting for us, and Krishna is interested to get us back there. So on one side we will be informed about what is the nature of this world, but also we must be very much informed about what's the nature of the spiritual world. Why? In order to be able to develop a desire to go there, first of all. If I tell you about some land that you don't know at all, and I say, let's go there, that's the homeland. But you have no clue. How does it look there? Does it feel there? How do you live there? Why would you feel attracted to go there? Or why would you have a desire to go there? So we need to have some impression, some image of what we are aiming at. So therefore there's so much descriptions also of the spiritual world to give us an idea, or like actually reminding us that there is a state of existence that is in accordance with the nature of the soul. So that's the actual attempt of spiritual life. Srila Prabhupada also named this magazine Back to Godhead, to actually return home to the spiritual world. And for that we need to let go of the place which is not our home, and detach ourselves from the idea that we can be at home here. So that's why there's a lot of rather skeptical description or very constructive, critical description of what material life is and material nature is. To wake up the intoxicated spirit soul, as it is said. So, and therefore I would like to go to another place in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the second canto, in which Brahma is telling his son Narada Muni about the spiritual world. You know, Brahma has an interesting story himself. We heard a bit already about him. When he was manifested on the lotus flower, he's called Swayambhu. He's unborn because Vishnu just manifested him from the lotus flower. There was no need of the unity of male and female. That just came later. Vishnu out of himself can create whatever. And also Brahma is capable out of his own body to just manifest other living entities. And then there became male and female, and then also the codependence for procreation of male and female. But in the spiritual world, or like on a higher spiritual platform, the souls or the jivas, they're capable, their creative power is such, they can out of themselves just manifest things out of their own body. Vishnu does it with the universes. It said out of his skin pores, he's breathing the material universes, and then they develop gradually. So in Brahma, first of all, like any of us, when we are born, we know nothing. We're practically completely ignorant. We have no clue what's going on. Our senses have to develop. We have to learn everything, and the really slightest. Brahma he was not like a material, like an earthen resident or baby, but he was in a situation that he didn't really know what's happening or what he's supposed to do. Or like other accounts say, he knew he was supposed to create, but he didn't know how. So he was practically by himself, and then he heard out of the universe from somewhere tapa. There came the syllables, tapa, and it means renounce. And then he was like practicing austerities and meditation. And when he matured in that, by something more happened, but I just shortly mention it, he was granted revelation. One revelation was, in one account it is, he saw Garbhodakasya Vishnu. In one account it's like said Brahma saw Garbhodakasya Vishnu, he was pleased and got the blessings from him. But at another time, Lord Narayan in Vaikuntha revealed himself to him. And Brahma entered Vaikuntha Loka, the spiritual world, and personally met Lord Narayan. And there's descriptions how he perceived, or like there are accounts of his visit to the spiritual world that he passes on to his son Narada. I would like to read a few of them so that we can get a contrast picture to the material world as we just heard it. So in chapter 9 of the second canto, text 9, it said, "The personality of Godhead, being thus very much satisfied with the penance of Lord Brahma, was pleased to manifest his personal abode Vaikuntha, the supreme planet above all others. This transcendental abode of the Lord is adored by all self-realized persons, freed from all kinds of miseries and fear of illusory existence." Text 10. "In that personal abode of the Lord, the material modes of ignorance and passion do not prevail, nor is there any of their influence in goodness. There is no predominance of the influence of time. So what to speak of the illusory external energy? It cannot enter that region. Without discrimination, both the demigods and the demons worship the Lord as devotees." With this verse, I heard once there's a mistake that actually demigods and demons alike worship that abode, because there are no demons in the spiritual world actually. So one thing is, there's no influence of the modes of nature, no influence of time. And Vaikuntha literally means place without fear. And it's described also by Sri Kapila Dev in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that what brings the fear is the time factor, Kala Shakti. Because it is the powerful energy that takes everything away. It also makes that things start to exist. It is also the impulse of creation. Vishnu uses Kala Shakti to start the interactions of the material elements. But it's also the reason that things cease to exist. And it brings an end. It is merciless. Time is merciless. There's no mercy. Time is just going on, and we have to surrender. It's also said, therefore, time represents the will of the Supreme Lord in the material world. Prabhupada often says, also the atheist, even if you don't accept the person of God whatsoever, but you must surrender unto time. You cannot, there's no way around it. So there's also, therefore, you can understand the time factor is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord. And it's that in the spiritual world, there's no such thing as material time. Of course, there's what we consider spiritual time, but to try to describing that is futile. It's no point, because it's beyond our grasp. But we can understand there's no fear because there's no loss. There's permanency. That what we said before. It's sat. There's nothing that can be taken away from us in an existential sense. So you'll always be peaceful. There's no concern whatsoever that you will lose that what is very dear to you. It means your very existence, your role, your identity there, and so on. And that's one reason why we should aim for the spiritual world, because there it's that what we actually desire in the core of ourselves. A permanent existence. In bliss. Of course, in the material world, you might be happy things come to an end. Because it's not a blissful state per se. Of course, the things that are blissful or happy, you wish them to remain. But the things that are troublesome, you hopefully they pass by quickly. But the main thing is, our consciousness of experiencing time is somehow or other made in such a way that happiness seems to pass by quickly, whereas suffering is experienced even short in terms of, if you measure it with time, but experience that it would be a long time. Somehow, we all know that experience, right? So, in the spiritual world, there's no such thing. And it sounds fantastic, or like too fantastic for people in yeah, it's just like a projection of souls who can't handle the realities of life anymore, so they create this phantasmagoria of a spiritual world. Well, everything can be critiqued. And at the same time, there's also the argument made by some of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada because they translated also the 11th canto and so on, and 12th. And they argue, well, it must be, this goes back to, I think, Platonian thinking, that if there's such a clear imagery, a need of the self, there must be something in accordance to it. Like similarly, we experience needs on a physical platform. Thirst, hunger, sleep, and so on. Because correspondingly, there are also things that can fulfill those needs. So exactly, the point is actually needs are corresponding to factual existing things. Otherwise, there would be no need. Why would you have a need for something that doesn't exist at all? That also contradicts the nature of things, also physically, mentally. There's always some kind of correspondence. The problem is, now we talk about something which is in transcendence, means beyond the reach of senses and mind. Well, yeah, of course, we cannot prove God, like empirically. We cannot prove the spiritual world, because by definition, it's beyond empirical science. And that's also what Immanuel Kant already in his realization theory established, that there's limits to the reasoning power of every human being, which does not mean that what exists ends with our capacity to grasp things. There are things beyond, and we can assume them, or sometimes we must assume them, though we cannot grasp them with our senses and mind. He says also free will. You cannot prove a free will. Or like even God or the soul, an eternal soul. But as a transcendental idea, it can be argued, it can be logically argued, you know. And then, of course, we enter the realm of faith. And it's also no shame to say, yes, that's our faith. Because at some point, faith starts. When the empirical knowledge ends, faith starts. And also empiricists have faith in something. It starts then when they are at the end of their capacity to grasp it with senses. And then they have their assumptions, what is beyond that? And that can be the belief in a nothing. It's also faith. You cannot prove that there's nothing after you die. How can you prove that? It's faith, right? Or like, has the universe an end? And if so, what comes after? You can speculate about it, but who can prove? You know, so it's a lot. At some point, we must admit that's humility, and that we have limited capacity for understanding, and it's also one of the defects of the conditioned soul, that we tend to cheat. Although we know we cannot know, we act like, yes, I know. It's cheating. So we have faith in the revelation of, for example, Brahma, or like the Vedic scriptures, and we hear about the spiritual world, and with faith we walk our way on the journey back to Vaikuntha. So, and here it's one aspect is that it's timeless, it's eternal, and therefore safe and without fear. Then text 11 says, the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets are described as having a glowing sky bluish complexion. Their eyes resemble lotus flowers, their dress is of yellowish color, and their bodily features are very attractive. They are just the age of growing youths. They all have 4 hands. They are all nicely decorated with pearl necklaces, with ornamental medallions, and they all appear to be effulgent. So also let's call it physical existence in the spiritual world is of a very different nature than in the material world. It said the last thing is that they all appear to be effulgent because spiritual bodies means it's Brahman, it's spiritual light. As we mentioned, like the lotus stem of the lotus flower coming from Keshava Vishnu has a golden radiance or effulgence, and it comes from the jivas, which are, as Krishna or Vishnu himself, they're full of spiritual energy and light. So also, therefore, spiritual bodies are radiant and eternal and blissful. And also what it said the spiritual, of course, items they can only be compared to material items. But we cannot fully grasp what is a spiritual garland, for example, or jewelry. We know gold, high caliber gold, or like diamonds and so on. So we can always take the most noble and high quality thing in the material world and somehow or other assume what is the original in the spiritual world. But it's not the same. It's even said everything is alive and has personality. Also Krishna's flower garland, it's not just, flowers as an impersonal element. It's living entities. The dhoti, everything is practically a spiritual being there, which is hard to grasp. But yes. Yes, and they have very beautiful features. No one struggles from, feeling ugly or like inferior in any way, because everyone has like a spiritual, powerful body, and there's no duality. There's no this distinctions like we have in the material world. There's a oneness on a spiritual platform which unites everyone with an equal qualitative existence. And then the descriptions go further. Some of them are effulgent like coral and diamonds in complexion and have garlands on their heads, blooming like lotus flowers, and some wear earrings. So of course many are bluish, but there's of course a variety also of all variety comes from the spiritual world. The reason why we have variety of things here in this material world is because in the spiritual world, this is the original. Like in genetic material, which is not in genes, like it can be passed on to your children. It must be already there in order that it manifests within the child. So similarly, from the spiritual world as the original, everything which we experience here has its original, powerful and complete form in the spiritual world. Therefore we said we just have a reflection of it. And it said the Vaikuntha planets are also surrounded by various airplanes, all glowing and brilliantly situated. These airplanes belong to the great Mahatmas or devotees of the Lord. The ladies are as beautiful as lightning because of their celestial complexions, and all these combined together appear just like the sky decorated with both clouds and lightning. So we should not think of airplanes in a sense as we know airplanes here. There, of course, we have in the books of Srila Prabhupada, we have certain depictions of, he instructed the artists in detail about how they should envision like the dresses, the garments. And often we see like swan-like with some little, I don't know how to describe this in English, but the pictures what an airplane is supposed to be there. There are also sometimes like palace-like, little flying palaces and so on, which are made of pure sublime spiritual items. So there's no gasoline, there's no nothing like that, So no air pollution as well. Further it says, the goddess of fortune in her transcendental form is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet, and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. And now it gets more personal how he perceives the Lord himself. The personality of Godhead seen leaning favorably towards his loving servitors, his very sight intoxicating and attractive, appeared to be very much satisfied. He had a smiling face, decorated with an enchanting reddish hue. He was dressed in yellow robes and wore earrings and a helmet on his head. He had 4 hands, and his chest was marked with the lines of the goddess of fortune. The Lord was seated on his throne and was surrounded by different energies like the 4, the 16, the 5, and the 6 natural opulences, along with other insignificant energies of the temporary character. But he was the factual Supreme Lord, enjoying his own abode. Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of God in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart, and thus in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love, he thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for living beings. And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired, and thus being much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma and slightly smiling, addressed him thus. Yes. And Srila Prabhupada comments on the handshake that this indicates or shows that Lord Brahma has besides that there's different rasas or relationships, besides being a servitor, there's also some amount of friendship. That indicates that there's also friendshiply relationship with Narayan. Because in Vaikuntha it said there are 2.5 rasas. Of course there's Shantaras, Dasiras, and Sakya to some degree. And Brahma, being the handshake, can also say, handshake comes from the spiritual world. Yeah, and Vishnu, Narayana was very pleased, and that's also something we see. Everything is very personal in the spiritual world, and it's about exchange, loving exchange. And Vishnu he's always favorably, lovingly disposed toward everyone, and he's smiling, and he's pleased, and his very appearance intoxicating. So in these descriptions, they are supposed to inspire us to aim for the spiritual world. I mean, this is now Vaikuntha. There are descriptions of other places in the spiritual world. There are limitless places. The highest Goloka Vrindavan, which is like also in the Kartik time, focus of attention. So seeing this in contrast, we mentioned this before, we have descriptions of material nature and spiritual nature shall enable us to see clearly the difference and choose that which is actually the better option. So therefore, each Upanishad instructs us we should know both, like the nature of the material world, nature of the spiritual world. We could say to make an informed choice, where do you want to stay? So we are wanted to go back to the spiritual world. So that should be our aim. So I stop here. Hare Krishna. If there are any comments or questions, we still have a few minutes time for that. No, this is empty. All right. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You can ask. Please, ask a question.
So there are a lot of different Brahmas. In every universe there is Brahma. Can it happen then that a Brahma will not succeed in receiving this blessing of allowing him to, that allows him to create?
No. Because that would be contrary to the interest of Vishnu, because he wants the creation to happen. I think the way Brahma has to go is instructive also for us, that spiritual achievement comes not just for free like that. There's an endeavor, there's tapasya, and we depend on the mercy of the Lord to reveal himself. But for Brahma, it took him some time, half of his day. And this is like a lot of time, because he noticed he went down the lotus stem to try to explore and figure out what's happening. But the creation must take place. That's the intent of Vishnu. And even if it's a different universe, we live in the smallest, it is said. There we have like kind of diameter of, I think, approximately 6 billion miles of the universe. And Brahma has 4 heads. There's also interesting stories. It said, why does he have 4 heads? One description is when he was finding himself on the lotus flower and exploring the 4 directions, he manifested 4 heads. But there are other universes which are way bigger, extremely bigger, and then Brahma accordingly manifests more heads. And there's one pastime also where he visits Krishna in his palace, and of course Krishna playing the role of a king, and he has like a doorkeeper, and the doorkeeper asks, "Whom shall I announce?" And he, Brahma. Okay, and he went, and the doorkeeper came back. Krishna asked, "Which Brahma?" And Brahma was perplexed. Which Brahma? The Brahma, it's the father of the 4 Kumaras, the beginning of practically everything. And okay, the doorkeeper went back and then let him in. And later he asked Krishna, like, why did he ask which Brahma? And then Krishna saying, like, kind of acting busy, yeah, there's so many universes, how should I know? Which Brahma is there? And then he manifested a pastime where Brahma could see that lots of Brahmas came to take darshan of Krishna, with 8 heads, 16 heads, 32, up to thousands of heads. And then not just Brahmas, then also Shivas like that. The story is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then Brahma said he felt like a rabbit among a herd of elephants. He was very... And the mystical thing was also only Brahma and Krishna could perceive all of them, but each Brahman, each Shiva that came, they only thought, I have a personal audience now with Krishna. They only perceived themselves and the Lord, although there were millions of them present. So, the creation has to take place, and Brahma always goes through his period of maturing spiritually and then being granted the service. And that's also a mentality like we should adopt. Like Srila Prabhupada sometimes said, first deserve, then desire. That for each service you must be fit also in the spiritual, in the material world. You must be trained, you must be qualified, competent to pick up a certain activity. So similarly also in spiritual life, it's like gradual process of learning and being trained. And then if you're mature enough, you will be blessed, so to speak, with the service that you're supposed to do. Yeah.
What happens with Brahma when he dies, when the universe ends?
It said Brahma, if he's truly like so matured, like the pure devotee, he goes back to Godhead. And if he's not pure enough, probably has to again be in the function of Brahma. But I said usually and if he is, there are two options. If Brahma can be a jiva, means an individual soul which is empowered, but it can be also partial manifestation or expansion of the Lord himself. So if Brahma, of course, is already, let's say, a Vishnu tattva, or like an expansion of Vishnu, there's no question where he goes, because it's Vishnu. But if it's a jiva, then if he's a pure devotee, he goes back to Godhead. And otherwise, I would assume, if you know something, but that he again in his capacity of Brahma serves. Or do you know something otherwise?
Can he fall down to earth again?
Well, theoretically, Krishna could put him there, but it's very unlikely. Because Brahma is like a very powerful being. There are descriptions in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Brahma is also tempted to fall into illusion, and he feels attracted to his own daughter and tries to enjoy her. But then he's stopped, but he's not like there is this one something which is considered to be a myth, actually, that we all started off as Brahma in the material world and then fell down, but it's actually not supported. There's no, according to what I know, not really evidence for that in Shastras, because we kind of maybe start from all kinds of places. There's no beginning. Also, there's Anadi, and Brahma usually doesn't fall down just like that. He's too elevated, actually. I mean, he can, of course, somehow or other be influenced, but as I said, it's very unlikely, my understanding. I mean, he has a direct connection to Vishnu. He's, as we said before, when he's asleep, when he's on a lotus, he's literally sitting on the lotus stem which comes out of the navel of Garbhodakasha Vishnu. And when he sleeps, it's considered Yoga Nidra, and he is talking to the Lord about matters of creation. What question is there of falling down? Right? I mean, something really dramatic must happen. I don't know what. Yeah. But maybe if someone has some other Shastric evidence where it says so. But yeah, interesting, of course, considerations, questions. All right? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Wie lange bist du jetzt gerade mal? So ein paar Tage oder?
Ja, zum zweiten Mal hier, aber jetzt seit einer Woche.
Schön. Ja, ist gut. Ja, nein. Ja, das ist ein bisschen tiefer drin.
Sehr interessant. Was das Thema?
Ja, die Schöpfung, das ist so mein Herzstück auch, so mit den Schöpfungsthemen und so.
Ja.
Ich bin so ganz zu Hause, sage ich.
Ja.
Gut, ich muss zur Arbeit. Ich wünsche dir einen schönen Tag, gell?
Danke, schönen Tag.